Hello. Well, that's been all of 10 minutes since I filmed part 3 and I've just been looking at it. I've mopped my humid brow from all the excitement, and I just stood back and I thought, you know what? And you know, if you saw the previous part at the beginning, I was saying I wasn't sure if I was in the mood. And I wasn't at the beginning, but then you get into it. And now I've seen a couple of things that I want to adjust while the paint is still wet. So clearly I'm going to invite you in to watch the next bit of the process. Now, the first thing I want to do, I was actually looking at that line. I did say that I wondered whether that was going to feel too even and too neat. So I'm actually just going to scrape a bit of that away. I've got a smaller palette knife and push a little bit of that up. And just there we go. So I'm making another layer of landscape, which just feels like it's not quite so even. And yeah, see, that's lovely. Sometimes just the smallest change can make all the difference. Getting a really nice variegated ridge with the same colours. And I just feel compelled to take that away. As we're getting further into the distance. Yeah, there we go. A bit here. Oh, that was really bothering me. And just that tiny little change. And sometimes it's even that which compels you to keep working at your painting. It's that like unresolved feeling. And I always say, don't I? You never have to question anything, that just feels good through and through. But if there's any like negative or question mark in your body, then that's what you need to address and ask where it's coming from, trying to find out where it's coming from. For me, it was just that line was just too even, and I couldn't like rest until I'd done something about it. And as much as I adore that pink, I actually feel that these colours here tone in so beautifully with the rest of the landscape. And there are little areas of pink emerging there. So I'm not going to remove the pink, but I want to add in some additional tones from the slightly more green palette. So I've recreated those blobs, the colours. I'm actually just going to bring the stool over here so I can put my palette on it. It's very useful bit of equipment. This stool, oops, sorry easel. Okay, now let me just step back a bit. Yeah, I mean, to your eye, that might still look like it's exactly the same shape, but to my eye, it's just, I've changed it up enough to stop myself from questioning it. And the painting is no longer saying the same things to me. So I'm just going to mix up a little bit of that kind of far away colour to introduce. Do I need the smaller palette knife? No, I'll swap back to the bigger one. Covers more ground. Just bringing a little bit of the green tone back in over the top of this pink. Yeah, so perhaps it will feel like it's slightly more on the same level in the landscape. And just, it'll add an extra layer. So much of, whoops, well, that wants to go there. Okay, ooh, interesting little gap appearing. So much of this kind of painting process is a curiosity and an exploration. Right, do I need to hold the canvas? You might want to be looking at my sweaty armpits rather than the painting, which is not a great look. Yeah. While the paint is still wet, you can move it, manipulate it an enormous amount. It's not just oils that you can do that with, but you can also scrape acrylic away. And I find so much, I'm just removing a little bit there, so much interest and texture and subtlety can be brought in by removing paint after it's dried. Now let's get some more light through there. I just felt like I needed to tone this down slightly while equally adding in a whole new layer of colour. Just that sort of minty grey. I quite like that big blob that's been left. And I want to introduce a little bit more darkness there. So creating these ridges, just building up that additional layer of colour. And if I did this behind the scenes, you know, you miss out on that whole extra step of questioning and just experimentation. Right, I wanted more light here. Just it was starting to again look too uniform. So the light is changing all the time in the painting. And with the palette knife, okay, so you want to get some texture up there. All right, knife. With the palette knife, you see, the way that the paint can be applied, and it can either very lightly or with a firm hand can create totally different results. There we go. That, the way it was just catching on the thickness of the paint from previous layers. I absolutely love that effect. And so we've clearly, whoops, I just splashed a big bit of white all the way up there, so that'll stay where it is. Let's bring some light back down over the top. That seems to be what's happening. Again, that's going to completely change the whole look. Let's take this off. The board finishes there, but I'll just bring the paint a little bit further. Yeah, that's what I wanted to happen. There's a subtlety of colour now through all of those layers, and I can still scratch back in. But now the white over the top is just giving some real additional interest. I'm starting to get too uniform again. The hand and the eye will try and create a pattern. Oh, excuse my paint. Try and create a pattern every single time. So you might find that you need to consciously go against the pattern that you're, you know, once you become aware that your hand is making a repetitive motion. Now that instantly starts changing the plane of the surface. So because the light, this is now creating different light forms, and as they're in blocks rather than lines, it looks much more like you know, vertical. I said that I wondered whether this was going to be sort of a rocky surface, and those vertical blocks are certainly making it look less like a soft landscape and more like rocks. Something is catching the light in a very different way to that side, and I may introduce dark coming back in when that is, well, saying that out loud, well, clearly I'm going to do that. A little bit of the light, that white light, catch the tops of those pink lines, and that's why I wanted to do this while it was still wet, because you get totally different results, of course, when the paint is mixing as it's wet. Just pressing very lightly so it's only just catching on the wet layer. And this will give totally different, tell a totally different story to what was evolving just before with all that brightness. Really, really different. They're starting to look like some rock forms now. I'm going to make a little bit of my purpley tone, which was up in the sky, feeling compelled to bring some of that back in, and going the opposite way. So introducing shadows essentially in front of the objects, literally, but they would be, the light is coming from the top. These shadows are being cast by the light objects I've just put in with the white paint. So, oh gosh, I love that where you can get like really interesting, almost humanoid forms appearing, like little people in the painting. Really like that. So still got some dark on here, introducing the dark back in. I don't know whether you can tell that the tone of my voice has changed after deciding to just keep going with this and introducing some different shapes and some lights and darks. It's just bringing me alive again. Isn't that just nuts how that can do just a little bit of paint play, and suddenly I feel like, ooh, something's happening here. We're making some progress, something unexpected is changing the way I feel about this bit of paint. And that, gosh, that is, ooh, yep. You know what? You've just got to answer that niggly call sometimes. So glad I did. It meant, you know, getting myself a little bit more respectable again, hooking up all the microphones, just kind of deciding, right, come on, let's do some more. I'm so glad I answered that inner irritation, because this is definitely feeling better. And when it comes to our art practice, so much of it is about that feeling. Yes, you see, look at the difference that's made. And you know, right from the start, I was talking about this perhaps being a rocky kind of mountain, and without getting too much detail in there, it's really changing the whole landscape on this side. And I don't want to overdo the dark. I'm just using up what's on my palette now. I'm so excited I can't speak properly. Let's get a little bit more this stuff. I'm just going to use up the paint that's on my palette and then stop and step back. That still seriously catching my eye. So let's get a lighter version of that over the top. Maybe the original shape is shadow, and now I need to create the object that is forming that shadow. At least just for now. Not quite sure what is going to happen there, but that's actually made a difference. Now we've got a little interesting thing happening here. Ooh. Right. Okay, that's standing up massively, isn't it? So a little bit of white on the top. We're just wanting to make sure that the light is uniform across the painting. If I'm going to adhere to some of those rules of realism, bring in a little bit of the dark underneath, but making sure that the light is on the top. Okay, so possibly keep looking at that bit, but let's just bring a tiny bit of that dark over on that side. Oh yeah, look at those colours when they mix when it's wet. Don't worry, I'll bring you in close in a sec. That is exactly what my soul needed. Just some, yeah, bring in some interest and some fascination with the colour mixing and just changing it up, taking those risks. You see, this is, I'm living it. It really does work. Right, a little bit more light there, bit of light there. Keep pushing when your body tells you. And perhaps a little bit of light. And then I can always come back to it. Right. Okay. I think that's, oh, that's a bit of salmon pink standing out. Just there. Yeah, that would want to be light, especially if it's right on the cusp of the horizon where it's really bright. And maybe I'm going to need to bring a little bit more light right into that section as the horizon vanishes. But that, yeah, you're right. I need to put a little bit of shading in now. I've put the light in front. Give that sense of making much smaller marks now, just to create the scale of it being further away. Yeah, you're right, my eye keeps going to that, but maybe when I come back with some serious dark greens, that might turn into a little bit more of a forest. But that is better. Again, creating a bit more of a varied line up here without losing the really gorgeous areas of sky, which I just love the marks. Don't be afraid to cover a bit up, Charlotte. There we go, that's more interesting now, breaking through with a bit of the light and the dark. Okay, all right, you want to go off there. You want to go off. There we go. Using up some paint. Right, I think I can now sit down and have a rest without this agitated feeling of needing to do a little bit more. So I am going to just bring you in close to have a little look. So from a distance, obviously, there has been a serious shift in what's happening with this landscape over here. But this is one of the things I just adore about painting and other people's paintings, is that you can get it really close and just look at the amazing mix of colours and textures, which from a distance then start to form a sense of something real from that play of light and shade. So there's a couple of areas which might need some additional work. This is all about layering, but that has transformed the way I feel about this painting for now. Doing that extra bit. That whole mass now on the right hand side has a distinctively rocky feel without it being too realistic or detailed. The suggestion of, and you can see how I've just changed the horizon line by scraping away that top hill edge. Now that has come together. That is now a really interesting, distinctly different two halves of a landscape with that incredible sky swirl and the yellow shape in the middle, which may need a little bit of toning down, or it may stay exactly as it is. But I can rest now. That's not going to bother me. I've just got to take you back in to look at some of those colours. That was all done wet, as you could see, with the white creating the lightness and then bringing the dark shapes back in. And look, and this is the area I did down there. Again, just blobs of lovely colour. But when you stand back, you start to see sort of rocky forms and all kinds of interesting landscape, suggestive shapes emerging. Thank you so much for being part of this journey. Right, see you in the next one. Bye.